Hey guys, PDC here, and we are back with another discussion-based video, which I think is kind of necessary in this context because, as you all know, I'm a clout chaser. No, okay, no, I kind of am. Obviously, this is a hot topic right now, so of course I'm going to capitalize on it, and there's probably not a better time for me to say something related to this topic. Of course, this is going to be a Smogon video, and what I'm going to be saying here today is, I'd say, pretty topical, and it comes from years of experience of seeing the same situation happen over and over and over. Although this time it might really be on an entirely, such a ridiculously, comparatively large scale than any other rebuke or rebuttal or revolt I've ever seen. Like, honestly, with that Blunder video, with the popularity it has garnered, I mean, God, it's really galvanized a lot of the troops of the community, I'll tell you that. There are a lot of people who are really upset about Smogon, who are technically involved in the community, including me, but my complaint is probably less valid than his, because as some TDs told me, I should not have expected to manage anyway, but that's not the point, because the point here is not about me dissing the TD team, or saying that Smogon, or what is wrong with it. Well, it is kind of saying what is wrong with it, but it's more of a question on the overall situation. Certainly, with every video I do of this nature, I want to encourage a dialectic. And in this specific context, what I'm going to be talking about today is why Smogon must exist in some sort of entity, and basically the future of competitive Pokemon on the internet. What is, how can we make Smogon, or make it better, or apply the same concepts to a different site or something, or whatever? And I'm going to be talking about money in Pokemon, maybe, slightly. I don't know if I want to do a whole, section on that, because I'm thinking about making a video on that, too. But, whatever, we're just going to get into it. So, I've mentioned this point, first of all, in nearly every video I've made, which has been a discussion on Smogon and how it runs, and how competitive Pokemon as a whole is, but I think that for Pokemon to succeed, and for tiering decisions to be made, it has to be consolidated. I don't think competitive Pokemon is ever going to transfer into in real life competitions like with Melee, so we need to keep competitive Pokemon consolidated. We need to have a basis for it online, a home base, and that base cannot be Showdown, or YouTube, or Discord, or anything but a forum. And I'm sure some people disagree. I'm sure people who have watched Blunder's video may think that this, we can have a YouTube-based, or a Pokemon Showdown simulator-based, or whatever, anything else, based, run community. That's impossible. Smogon has to exist in some form. In some theoretical application, you have to have Smogon. You cannot have Smogon's idea and competitive Pokemon removed from each other. You can't. You need a place. It doesn't have to be Smogon. You need a consolidated place where competitive Pokemon is happening, where tournaments can be hosted, where decisions can be made, where large-scale discussion posts and areas can be hashed out, where tiering decisions can be posted, where usage stats can be posted. You can't do this on a Discord server. You can't. You cannot. I could, for a site that is as large as Smogon, you cannot even remotely hope to make something out of a Discord server that is equitable to what Smogon has running right now. And that's my biggest worry here, because I feel truly like a lot of people are starting to think that competitive Pokemon can exist without it being centralized, and it can't. I'll tell you what, guys. In the modern day, my biggest fear is that a centralized competitive Pokemon forum will cease to exist. Because you have people, like Blunder and Pokeaim, you have Pokemon Showdown the Simulator, who are arguably more influential in the competitive field than any Smogon analysis or any Smogon user. I mean, these guys are fucking big. So what I want to talk about, and what I'm trying to say is that Separating these things, competitive Pokemon and a home base, you can't do that. And that home base has to be solid, it has to be stationary. You cannot remove it. There are a million reasons for this, but I'd say the biggest, and the biggest complaint here, and the biggest reason, reason that we cannot do this is because you need to have some sort of bureaucratic entity. You have to. You have to. You need to have a bureaucratic entity that exists and has the auxiliaries and has some sort of rigid system. You have to for something like this to work. And I think that's a really big danger that we face. And I think that a lot of people are misinterpreting the message of Blunder and some other YouTubers who occasionally, lash out and say, we don't need Smogon. You're right. We do not need. There is nothing intrinsically valuable about the name Smogon if we make another competitive hub. You're right. Smogon is just a name, but it's the association which matters, and people think that the association, the connection between a centralized name and a theoretical technique in organizing competitive Pokemon, you cannot separate them. You can't. You cannot do that and not bring out the destruction of the community. Listen, I've come online every day for the past 10 years, and I have watched the Pokemon community grow from fragmented forms into 2 forms into just one huge competitive Pokemon entity, and that's Smogon. And I honestly do not, and there's a reason why these forms all died out. Because the Pokemon community works better when it's consolidated in one place, where everything is organized, where there is no dissent, and especially now that you have really just one simulator running things, it has to be run under a similar bureaucratic rule. Because the tiering system, listen guys, if we remove a centralized authority in competitive Pokemon, the tiering system will go to shit. Our tiers, our leaders, everything that makes competitive Pokemon recognizable and competitive will go to shit. We are not going to have any drawn out or, strong, valuable arguments on competitive Pokemon that really elucidate the points and tiering decisions and theory. And if we remove Smogon and we make it abstract, you cannot hope for competitive Pokemon to survive for very long. You can't. And I know that maybe I am seeming, maybe it seems to you guys like I'm being over dramatic, but I truly do not believe that competitive Pokemon, with as small as it is, and with as, absolutely, how incredibly just volatile it can be with people's opinions on it, I don't believe that you can have what we have right now, which I consider good, the tiering decisions, the tournaments. I don't think we can have that. I don't, if we get rid of the base. It doesn't have to be Smogon. It has to be a form. It has to be something tangible. And that is something which I fear very much. I really do. That eventually people will recognize, Smogon as, something that's devalued to a point where we stop listening to it. Not even the form itself, but the idea behind it. The idea is what matters. Back to the basics. You can, if you think that Smogon is bad now because of some, retroactive changes we've made, or you think its evolution, is corrupt, or the change in the site is bad, you can think that. But the idea behind it is something which we should follow. Pokemon on the internet, competitive Pokemon on the internet, you have to follow it. And I understand the revolts, and I understand that we're frustrated as a community with Smogon, because, like I said, this type of talk happens every couple years. It happened when Great Sage wanted to make a new form, back in, 2010. It happened when Nugget Bridge was made and DG Sears left Smogon en masse. It happened when Philip and Blue Kirby made Poke Battle, which failed. It happened when PO was competing for Smogon with tiering. And every single time when the question gets brought up, is Smogon the place for competitive battling? Every single time somebody brings that question up, every single time, it always dies. Because we do not have the enthusiasm or the will to really change what we have right now. Because for most of us, what we have right now is good. And, you know, I really do think that, I think Smogon is here to stay. You know, I support it. I'm a pretty, you know, vicious supporter of Smogon, at least in its tiering system and competitive Pokemon, you know, theory. You know, maybe I don't care about the other parts of the site, but until a viable alternative arises, I don't think that we can survive without, you know, a constant, you know, overlooker in the form of Smogon or some other tiering entity. You can't. You cannot possibly think that this will work any other way. And I listen. There are plenty of big YouTubers, you know, who dislike Smogon because they think it's elitist, or they think that, you know, these guys are, you know, whatever. But I've already talked about the importance of elitism and competitiveness in tiering decisions, and while I don't think that should carry over to tournament direct decisions, which are not based on skill of the game, but based more on, or supposedly based on fairness, I still think the same idea applies, because if we want the tournament system as it runs on Smogon to continue, you're going to always have some bureaucratic entity overlooking it. It's a given. We don't want this community to turn into chaos, and I don't want this community to turn into chaos. And admittedly, yes, Smogon is possibly being rivaled in influence, maybe even beaten outright by people like Pokeaim and Blunder, because those guys have huge fan bases that watch them and who, you know, revere them as, I mean, the veneration from their fans is absolutely ridiculous. But I'm gonna say this, you know, once and for all. I really do think that if we are looking for an alternative, you know, the two guys, Joey and Blunder, who could possibly pioneer it, have to consider that you cannot remove a centralized form from the equation. If those guys want to make a new form, if they want to make an entire new process to competitive Pokemon, if they want to revolutionize the game, if they even have the energy for it, you know, they can go and do that. But I truly don't think that it's gonna happen, because we really don't have the stamina, and I highly doubt some people care enough to do it. Because, like I said, we have hiccups here and there, but overall what we have is probably fine. I know we like to dream of anarchy, and we all like to, you know, rebel against, you know, and bite the hand and whatever, but, I mean, the idea must exist, and I will fight that. You know, I could word this in a very more eloquent way. You know, I don't mean to be cynical and saying that there is no alternative, and that I wish there was a perfect system, but this is all there is. I don't want to be the person saying that, especially considering what I believe in outside of Pokemon. But I really do feel like this is the only system that could function. I've thought about making a YouTube-based, you know, environment for competitive Pokemon. I'm sure plenty of people have thought about making, you know, Discord-based, or have already made Discord-based, you know, Premier Leagues and stuff like that, and they're just never taken seriously. They're never, ever going to be taken seriously. You need to have, at the very least, I don't care if it's a facade, I don't care if it's an illusion, it does not matter if it's, you know, if it's really all, you know, a joke. You need to have some sort of semblance of authority in a community, which is recognizable, especially in the case of a game which is as small as Smogon. You cannot avoid it, and if we truly think that we can change this, we have to put everything on the table, and we have to look at why this has worked for the past 15 years. I mean, geez, yeah, listen, I'm all for changing things up and trying new things, but at the moment, I don't think that there is another route we can take. I'm always against reform, because I believe that reform usually ends up being cyclical, and everything goes back to how it was. But I'm going to choose to believe that Smogon and the competitive game of Pokemon is different than the economy or contemporary social justice, concerns. And instead, I'm going to hope that we can reform certain authority positions and how this place is run and actually make a change. Because reform is probably the best thing we can do here. Maybe I am speaking as an elite here, but I truly believe, and I'm sure, this is very recognizable in every video I do, because whenever I make a discussion-based video on Smogon, I always say the same thing, that we have to keep in mind the game is important. If we want this game to survive, we need it to be consolidated. Everyone, you gotta remember that at the end of the day, you need to have something tangible that exists, that we can recognize, it's a symbol, and really, you have to. Because in this case, Smogon, the forms are the real. They're tangible, they exist, you can go on them and post them. The imaginary idea of competitive Pokemon and what it represents. You gotta keep it, guys. You gotta keep it. You gotta keep it. And again, it doesn't mean you have to keep the site Smogon, but you gotta keep what it represents. You have to keep the symbolic aspect of Smogon relatively intact. And that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you guys for watching. Maybe Money and Pokemon video. I'll do that next or something. Peace out.